What's up, everyone? It's Kanan,
It's Jessie.
and we are the Geeky Saying Couple, and welcome to another episode of RWBY Alternate Realities. And this is take 4, because it took me forever to get the name right. So this is pretty much our RWBY What If series. I think this is like the third one we've done. We've already done What If Blake Didn't Run at the end of Volume 3, and we did What If Blake Had Stayed in the White Fang. So this episode is a topic that's really, really popular. I've seen this in a lot of alternate universe fan fictions, art, comics, all that, and that is what if Yang had been raised by Raven and grew up as a bandit. And the thing is, she'd be a lot different. This version of Yang is going to be a lot more rough, a bit more, I don't want to say sadistic or anything, but she's ripped people off. She's stolen from people. She's gonna not be 100% a good person. But that's a great thing about long-term storytelling. People can change, you know. Look at Dragon Ball. Vegeta was not a good person whatsoever when he was first introduced, and by the end of Super, he's like the ultimate good guy. So, you know, deciding to do something completely different here, because with the Blake video, we found a way for Blake to still go to Beacon for volumes 1 through 3. It's because, you know, the White Fang was suspicious of Ozpin and all the other headmasters, so she got sent in kind of like a spy. This version of Yang, I don't think would have went to Beacon, because for the sole reason that Raven would not want Yang to end up anywhere near Ozpin. So, going with that as our basis, in this version, Raven decides to keep Yang for herself. She still leaves Tai, but she takes Yang with her. Does she leave before or after Yang was born? I don't know, because pregnant mom leaving looks a little bit better than mom taking their newborn child and running. Especially when, you know...
Either way, it's bad, but...
I mean, if Tai was a bad husband, I could see it, but he, for all we know, he wasn't. So I'm going to go with she left while she was still pregnant. That sounds a little bit more better than her having the baby, than scooping the baby up and leaving, you know. I think Tai would have called the police at that point. But I don't think Raven would care, because she's a bandit. So yes, this version of Raven leaves while still pregnant with Yang. She wants to raise the baby on her own. She wants to raise the baby her way, away from Ozpin, away from that, any way that she will end up in a huntress school. She does not want that.
Like, that, and I can see also, like, and this kind of would fit the Raven, too. She probably also, nothing against Tai, but she knows he's a teacher, so he's going to lead her into that, so instead of just... That would also fit with her leaving while still pregnant, because that way she just leaves him pretty much clean slate to start without her, to go on without her.
And so, you know, Tai still ends up with Summer. They still have RWBY together. Crow, on the other hand, is kind of going back and forth. Once Yang is old enough, he starts meeting and training Yang properly in secret behind Raven's back.
Which is definitely a very Crow move anyway.
Now, it's never been stated if Yang built Ember Celica herself. I mean, I'm guessing.
I think she did, because everyone that went to Signal built their own weapons.
Yeah.
RWBY stated that in the first episode.
Yeah, so I'm going to guess that she did build Ember Celica herself. I'm sure Crow supplied the materials, but he told her, hey, tell your mom you stole these, okay? So yeah, she ends up with Ember Celica the same way. But another thing about that makes this version of Yang rougher is that Raven didn't just make her second because she's her daughter. No, Yang had to start at the bottom, prove herself, prove her worth, prove that she just wasn't going to be wasted space, eating up food for more, because living in a bandit camp, I'm guessing food is going to be scarce at some point, and
depending on where they're at, where the camp's at, they could move camp and be somewhere else, and there could be plenty of access to food. Then they could move again, and there could be absolutely almost nothing.
yeah, and sadly in this kind of life, it'd be the strongest survive. If you don't pull your weight, you starve. So by the time Yang is of the age that we meet her originally in Volume 1, she's been through her share of raids. She has done, she's ripped people off. Is it pretty much... Was it ever 100% confirmed that, yes, her and Crow had killed people, being bandits and all that? I mean, I'm guessing so, because that's what bandits do, especially if it's between them getting caught.
I mean, maybe, but I don't, like, the way that they've described things...
Because Raven stated the reason why they went to Beacon in the first place was to learn how to be more effective killers.
Yeah, but it didn't... Thing is usually when like the way the bandits, like, it seems that they work is they're not killing innocent people, they're killing people who have things,
so has this
in their way.
So let's go ahead and clear this up. Has this version of Yang killed?
Maybe to defend herself.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get that in. So no, this version of Yang is still not a bloodthirsty killer or anything, but she has had to do it to protect herself or protect members of the tribe. So as she's getting older, she starts hearing from Uncle Crow that she has a half-sister, a half-little sister. Now, in this version, Summer still disappears, but since Yang isn't there to raise RWBY herself, Crow's kind of being a little bit more helpful in helping Ty raise RWBY, but also being there for Yang. So Crow's doing double duty, triple duty, quadruple duty. He's working for Osmond, he's a teacher, and he's being...
The man never sleeps.
yeah, pretty much. I
don't think he'd have time to drink either.
No, probably not.
I don't think this version would be drinking.
So, this version of Yang would not be at Beacon for volumes 1 through 3. There's no reason for her to go there. Raven doesn't want her anywhere near the schools. And so, what happens with Team RWBY? Well, RWBY, Weiss, and Blake are still part of the team, but there would be a fourth member. Now, I struggled with coming up with a character to be the fourth member, but like originally I thought maybe Pyrrha, maybe something happens and Penny ends up going to Beacon instead of being from Atlas, but the same thing still happens. They both perish during the fall of Beacon. So if you like, and it's like if it's Pyrrha, then Team Juniper doesn't happen, and they have to have a fourth member who also passes away. So it's kind of, so I'm just going to safely say there was a fourth unnamed member of Team RWBY that perished at Beacon. So by the time we get into Volume 4 and 5 era, it's just RWBY, Weiss, and Blake. But the same thing still happens. Blake runs, Weiss ends up in Atlas, RWBY ends up at home, but she, goes on her journey with John, Ren, and Nora, with Crow keeping an eye on them. So eventually, the same thing that happens in this version. Weiss ends up captured by Raven's tribe, and that's where she meets Yang for the first time. So, of course, Yang has heard all about the Shnees, so she doesn't think too highly of Weiss. She may, this version of Yang still teases and all that, maybe flirts a little bit, but, at the end of the day, she's a prisoner. They're going to make a lot of money off of her. That's all Yang cares about. But then the name RWBY comes out of Weiss's mouth, and that piques Yang's interest, because she's like, didn't Uncle Crow say I have a half-sister named RWBY? And so Yang starts questioning Weiss, what does she look like? What is she like? Blah, blah, blah. Now, would this version of RWBY still be the same as the RWBY in original, even though Yang wasn't there to raise her? I think mostly, yeah. I mean, would she have had that nice of a childhood? I don't know, but Ruby, Weiss, and Blake are pretty much the same characters they are in the canon show than they are here. So Weiss is like, well, if you let me out of here, I can take you to RWBY. So Yang is like, either screw my mom over, let you out, cost the tribe a lot of money, and meet my half-sister finally, or just let you rot in this cell, make a lot of money, and continue my life as a bandit. Also, this version of Yang still has her prosthetic. What happened in this instance is that it was a raid that went wrong, but it was still caused by Adam because the White Fang showed up. Well, they were pretty much targeting the same payload. You know, Yang's like, this is ours. White Fang's, no, it's ours, you bandit scum. A fight broke out. Yang still lost her arm. Except instead of Ironwood sending it as a gift, Raven just hijacked an Atlas train, had it stolen, had it brought for Yang. So Yang wrestles with it for a couple of days, and she's like, well, if I let her out, how's she going to get me to RWBY? And then she remembers Raven's semblance, which is like, how am I going to convince my mom to let me go there? So, and the relationship between this version of Yang and Raven isn't bad, but, you know, Yang is getting at that age where she's questioning everything her mom says. She's kind of rebelling a little bit. And so...
It's a teenager.
Yeah, pretty much. And so she's like, okay, fine. I want you to help me get to RWBY, but I know a faster way. So she kind of uses Weiss as collateral in a way. Tells her mom, look, let me take charge of this. She's promised, you know, this much if we get her to Haven safely, because she can get from Haven to Argus and all that. Raven is, of course, suspicious. She doesn't believe a word Yang is saying. But in the back of her head, she's like, you know what? This blowing up in her face will be a good life lesson for her. So Raven, without thinking, agrees. So she opens, a portal to Haven. Weiss, of course, knows that that is where Ruby and them are heading. Because, Crow is going back and forth. And they end up at Haven, and that is where Yang meets Ruby for the first time. Now, do they have this big hug? On Ruby's side, yes, because Ruby has also heard that she's got an older half-sister. Yang is kind of dumbfounded because, she's not used to this kind of affection.
I don't see her shoving her off.
Oh, no, she doesn't.
Kind of
She freezes a little bit. It's kind of one of those hugs where one's getting hugged and the other one's arms are just like, oh my God, what's going on? And that's where, she meets Jean, Ren, Nora, and the newly reincarnated Ozpin. She's like, what the hell? What's going on? So pretty much the events of Volume 5 kind of play out the same way, except, Yang is way more, she's way more argumentative. She's way more crass in a way. Like, she would tell jokes. She would still tell puns, but probably not ones you'd want your parents to hear. But the rest of the time they're, at the little safe house that everyone complained that they spent way too much time at, her and Ruby are getting to know each other. They are bonding, like sisters. And really that's, Yang starts to realize that's what she's wanted for a long time, is to have a family that feels like one. Now, I'm not saying Raven is still a bad mom. She was tough. Tough love, in a way. And I mean, does this version of Raven care a lot more? Like, I still think the canon version of Raven still does care about Yang. I think we kind of saw that teased at the end of Volume 5.
I know we've talked about this in many videos.
Yeah.
I mean, her other emotions are going to cover what she's really actually feeling.
This version of Raven, though, doesn't care to show it a little bit more. But still, she always showed tough love, so Yang's not used to a large amount of affection just out of nowhere. but she gets that from RWBY. You know, RWBY hugs her a lot more, says a lot more nice things. So it's going to take Yang a little bit of time to get used to that. So anyway, Yang is told what's going on. She's told the whole grand scheme of things. Why would they trust a bandit teenager? Well, for one, she's RWBY's older sister and Crow's niece. So, and Crow would vouch for her, saying, hey, Yang's a bit of a rough case, but she's trustworthy. So they go to Haven. Same thing about plays out, except when Raven shows up. And she's going to be like, I knew you were lying to me. I knew this would blow up in your face. Yang, of course, is not as... She's not as angry as she was in the original about Raven teaming up with Cinder. She'd more kind of be annoyed. Like, of course, you chose the other side just to one-up me, you know? And Raven would kind of be like, in a way, yeah. So it's kind of a rivalry thing going on here instead of some, like, personal vendetta or anything. So, of course, being Bumblebee shippers, we got to win. Blake shows up. And pretty much, you know, Weiss and RWBY react the same way they did because they've not seen Blake since Beacon. Yang, however, has never met Blake, but she still has the same reaction. But it's more like, oh my gosh, who's this gorgeous girl that just showed up? And Blake, of course, is like, oh, where'd this gorgeous blonde come from? You know? So anyway, Yang jumps into the vault. Her confrontation with Raven is not... In this case, it wouldn't be as emotional as it was in the show. It's more like, I cannot believe you know, did this just to one-up me. And Raven's like, oh, you lied to me. When have I not lied to you? You know, stuff like that. And
I guess Raven probably go,
True,
but, you know, but also that would probably be where, you know, Raven would, you know, after all that, you know, telling Yang, you know, for her to realize, okay, well, yeah, I teamed with Cinder to double-cross her.
Yeah.
So.
Because she's a bandit. But Raven, in this case, would be proud of Yang. She'd be like, that's a real bandit move. I'm proud of you, you know. But it would get tense when Yang says, look, I don't want to do the bandit life anymore. I want to do something more meaningful. I'm going with RWBY. Raven would not like that because she knows about Salem. She knows exactly what Yang would be walking into. So at that point, it would be kind of like the same kind of little argument they had. It just wouldn't be... I mean, it may actually be a little bit more emotional because Raven has raised Yang since she was a baby, and now she's all of a sudden scared that she's going to lose her just like that, even though she could have lost her at any time living life as a bandit. So Raven may shed a little bit more tears this way and be like, you know, please don't go. You know, we have a great thing going. You know, if you'll stay, I'll try and talk Ty into letting RWBY join the tribe. I don't know. You know, she would try anything she could to talk Yang out doing this, but Yang is standing her ground. And instead of crying and leaving, I think Raven would leave more in a huff this time around. But she would also add before leaving, if things get too bad, come home.
Yeah, I see her. I was just going to say, I see her before, you know, actually fully leaving, her actually saying something to her about, you know, just pretty much, you know, be safe, and if something bad happens that you can't handle, come home. Like, yeah. It's something along those lines of pretty much her way of saying, I love you.
Yeah,
just be
pretty
careful.
much. Yeah, pretty much. And so, Volume 6 starts. This version of Yang at this point is not really sold on the whole saving the world kind of thing. Like, it's like, because the Yang in canon had seen enough to know that, yeah, this is a legit thing. This version of Yang's like, whatever, this might as well just be a little, like a field trip or something. But she is very interested in getting to know the cute dark-haired girl known as Blake. So, of course, this version of Yang is way more flirtier, a bit more confident in her flirting. She doesn't stumble over herself like Yang does in the show. Though maybe eventually she still does because she starts actually liking Blake a lot. And you know how some people are. They're very confident, and they talk a big game around people they like or find attractive. But when they find that person they actually really find attractive and really want them to like them back, they're like, it's like it's like that joke in Family Guy. My name is Tal. I have a Peter for you. Is that how it went?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When he tries to talk to Lois.
Yeah, when they first met. So, yeah, and like the whole train trip, she's talking to Blake. Blake doesn't know if she can trust this rough and tumble bandit at first. But during the grim fight on the train, Blake sees that Yang's covering her back. They actually fight really well together.
Have a natural
chemistry together.
Chemistry of fighting.
And so that's why once we get to the farm area, Blake tells Yang about Adam for the first time. And this version of Yang still does have the PTSD because, she still lost her arm. This version of Yang may be a bandit, but she's still a human being.
PTSD is PTSD.
Yeah.
There's no other two ways.
But this version of Yang is more like, I know that asshole. He did this to me, So they find that they, in a messed up way, I guess they kind of have also that in common, Adam stabbed Blake, but she still got away. He cut off Yang's arm. And so, unlike their interaction in canon, where, Blake said the whole "I'll protect you," and Yang got upset about that, they have a little bit more of a close interaction together here. Because we don't want to rush Bumblebee. We still want it to permanate like it does in the show. But, there's already a bit of physical attraction going on here. And, the apathy thing still happens, though I think Yang in this version would have been maybe a bit more affected by the apathy because of her upbringing and how she is. But it still plays out the same way. They go to Argus, they steal a airship to Atlas, and they end up in Atlas. And really, I can't think else much that would Volume 7 is so weird in that there's not much change when it comes to how the characters do things in that volume. I think by this time, Yang is starting to... Oh, God, I completely forgot one important thing. The fight with Adam. Jeez. It is late. Okay, it still kind of plays out the same way. Adam doesn't really have that jealousy here because it doesn't have the prior history. He didn't see Yang at Beacon. He didn't see how Blake looked at Yang. At this point, he's just surprised they're both in the same area. But as the fight goes on,
he would start to see a connection between the two of them.
Yeah, because Yang is still checking Blake out every chance she gets and all that. And being a bandit and knowing this is Blake's ex-boyfriend, she would goad him a bit more here, being like, wow, what a loser. You had her and you scared her off, It's like she would what's it called? She would tempt him. She would rub stuff in his face. She would not care. She would laugh at him, because this version of Yang is just, I don't want to say tougher because Yang's tough enough as it is, but she's hardened. She has more of an edge, yeah. So the fight plays out the same way as it is. I think Yang probably hits harder here. Like she's a little bit more, I don't want to say bloodthirsty, but she has more of a violent streak maybe a little bit because of what she grew up in.
I can still see Adam saying some of the same things to her, in that fight, because obviously he sees the connection. It's obviously at some point he's going to look between them and still get extremely pissed off.
Well, yeah.
Cause that, but
he's also going to say stuff like, she did this to me. She's going to do the same thing to you. And Yang's going to be like, I've done people that way my whole life. It's not new to me.
he would probably make comments about, obviously not at Beacon, but when when she lost her arm,
Yeah.
that fight, he'd probably bring up things like that and say, well, you think you're still stronger than you were then, and clearly she would be.
Yeah. And I mean, it plays out the same way. Both Blake and Yang take out Adam. They still have the little interaction they had at the end of that. They get the airship. They go to Atlas. Now, like I was saying earlier, Volume 7 is kind of hard to change a whole lot because things happen so rapidly in Volume 7 and in 8. You know, like, yeah, in 7 we get a little bit of a montage that takes over the course of a few, you know, who knows how long. We've still not been told if it's a month, if it's more than a month. But besides that little time skip montage, from 7 to 8, things are boom, 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 boom. Like, it's just continuous. And
but when you get to like the licensing part, I can see the reason.
yeah, that's one part I struggle with. Since Yang didn't go to Beacon to be a huntress, what would happen at the licensing scene?
I think she'd still get it though, because Crow would vouch for her.
Probably.
Because Crow's the one that trained her. Even though it wasn't in a school, he's still a teacher. He's still a huntsman.
Yeah,
being trained under a huntsman would still count as something towards a license. Because
though this version of Yang, unlike the others where they're like, oh man, you know, so much has happened, I forgot that this is what I originally wanted, she'd be like, huh, cool. I don't know if she'd be like that, but you know.
She probably wouldn't imagine that she would have something
more
that.
than likely that. Be like, you know, I never wanted to be a huntress, so this is kind of
But she's, like, she would have a realization she's, you know, her past, she's skilled enough to be this.
And maybe,
to be, you know.
And maybe Blake would say something like, you know, here's her chance to. I don't want. I would say something like, you know, a chance to, you know, get her life, have a better life or something like that.
A chance to do more with her life than just what she's doing.
Yeah.
So.
And at this point, Yang is looking back on her life and being like, yeah, maybe, you know, maybe I shouldn't have ripped off that one family or ripped off that poor traveler, you know, stuff like that. So by this time, she's doing a lot of reflecting. And, you know, same thing happens. Her and Blake go to the club. Since we don't know what happened at the club, we can't really go off anything, and just that, you know, maybe.
But they're slow. Like, at this point, they're probably getting a bit closer faster than usual, just the way things have been playing out.
And even though this version of Yang would probably make a move way faster, she's, in this short amount of time, she's already learned, you know, with what went on with Adam, that Blake might not appreciate that very well. She doesn't.
No, but so she, like, to me, Yang would find other ways. Instead of suddenly making a move on her to potentially scare her off.
This version of Yang might actually go ahead and come out and say, hey, let me take you on a date sometime.
Yeah, or, like, but their feelings are growing a bit more rapidly, but it's not. It would still be, still working the story, but she wouldn't push of going into a relationship.
Yeah, in this
Their
version,
feelings would be rapidly growing.
And in this version, Blake may still be somewhat cautious because she knows that, you know, with Yang's semblance and all that, and this version of Yang being a little bit more edgier, she'd be a little bit more cautious at that point. But
Yang would work to prove herself.
Yeah, this would be a kind of a side arc in this version. Yang showing a more compassionate, more caring side to herself, and not just for her relationship with Blake. RWBY would also bring that out of Yang. You know, them going on missions together, and Yang seeing how her sister handles things.
That and all the time that they did spend in Atlas, all the missions that they went on, you know, the ones that she'd go on with RWBY, or the ones that she'd actually go on with Blake. I mean, that would add to it, especially since, like you said, we don't know how long they were there.
Yeah.
I think it was at least a significant amount of time for all the missions they've done.
Yeah.
So
maybe Arrowfail will give us a better.
Yeah, but clue. I think with that span of time that they were working on, you know, everything, that would help them grow, which would lead to things in 8.
Yeah. Yeah, and by Volume 8...
Like reactions and things that are in 8.
Yeah, now by Volume 8, same thing happens. Like, this version of Yang probably would have been way more argued with RWBY a bit more. But the same thing happens. Groups split up. A lot of people were talking about it, like when Ren and Yang were arguing, and people noticed how Yang was just standing there giving him a look. People were like, she's like, just try it, bro. Yeah, this version of Yang probably would be thinking that, be like if you make one move on me, your head's gonna roll, you know. But like Yang is cooling off at this point. She's not going to be quick to conflict like she's been in the past. Because, like I said, she's learned from Blake, she's learned from RWBY, she's learned from everybody how to handle these situations. So it's kind of like this version of Yang is learning to be smarter and fight smarter without the arc in Volume 4 of training under Tai. But, you know, same thing still happens. They get picked up by Winter and them. They go into the well. This version of Yang is kind of like, heck yeah, this is awesome. You know, who would have ever thought I'd end up here? But still probably would have been like she was in the show. Like, why do we think this was a good idea again? You know?
Yeah, after the whole, this is cool. Okay, why was this a good idea?
Yeah. She's once again the first member of Team RWBY to fight against Salem. And she'd have been like, holy crap. Mom was right. What am I doing here? But it still plays out the same way. The well blows up. They get out safely. They all reunite. The horrible, horrible stuff at the end of Volume 8 happens. But this, you know, the big key thing here, though, is despite being raised differently, despite both of them not being there for each other most of their lives, when Yang sees Neo going after RWBY, Yang does the same thing she does in the show. She throws RWBY out of the way, takes the blow herself, and she falls. And in this version, this is kind of Yang's redemption of the kind of life she's lived. Because, you know, like I said, in these what ifs, it's complete, you know, what if, definitely. You can change characters. You can change events. If you want something to stay the same, you can keep it the same. In the show, I mean, yeah, Yang did something that she's always dedicated her life to, and that was taking care of RWBY. But it also kind of goes with the whole thing Yang has of putting herself in danger to protect the one she loves. You know, she did it for Blake. She's done it for RWBY.
And I'm sure in her past life she probably did it also to protect her mom,
yeah,
her tribe. You know, that was family. So.
Yeah, and so in this version, her, for the, like, you know, you could kind of say she kind of did it for Blake during the fight with Adam, but this is the first time she has acted on unconditional love for somebody. Because her and Blake, yeah, there's romantic feelings there, but it's still building.
It's still building, but there's enough there, but this, you know,
is her sister.
Yes.
And for the first time in Yang's life, she's not thinking of monetary gain. She's not thinking of herself. She thought of nothing but saving RWBY. And so if this was the end for Yang, she would have been like, well, I'm happy. You know, for my first time, I did something without thinking about myself. I'm okay with that. But of course, Yang isn't dead. RWBY, Weiss, and Blake join her. And we move on to Volume 9. And see, it still depends on what happens in Volume 9. We don't know yet.
I still think Blake would react the same because...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Because, like I said, like, in this version, they may not be... it wouldn't be the same thing, but their feelings would be rapidly growing. So Blake would obviously have a lot more there still right now. And for the connection they have, like, together with things, with fighting, you know, pretty much now being a team and how they work, you know, the closeness that she had gained, she was going to feel the same way.
Yeah.
So she would still react that way.
Yeah.
She'd still turn around and attack Neo.
Yeah.
So...
And, like, depending on...
And save RWBY, and go after RWBY, even though they both, unfortunately, fell too.
Now... I wish we knew what happened in Volume 9, but like if they do a kind of thing like the ghosts of the past haunting you, this Yang would have a very rough time in this other world, because she would see people who've died because of her, who have starved because of her, because she robbed them. She would see a lot of messed up stuff that would probably like just change who she is completely. But we don't know yet what happens in Volume 9. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's kind of like an outline of what would happen if we had Yang raised by Raven, pretty much Bandit Yang. And not saying that Yang wouldn't become the character she is in canon, but what's the fun in that when you can just completely rewrite someone for fun? And that's what these what ifs are. And you know, we'll never claim any of these what ifs are better than what happened in the show or anything like that. Like I said, this is, you know, there's a difference in completely rewriting something just for fun, you know, for shits and giggles. But, you know, coming up with it and being like, oh, this should have happened in the show. No, that's not what these are for. These are for fun. So hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, click that like button. We are 19 away from 500 subscribers. Please help us hit that before the end of the year so we can do a big old 500 subscriber special. And yeah, as always, guys, this is Kanan.
This is Jessie.
We love you all very, very much. Stay safe out there. Take care of yourselves. And we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.